It's Monday the 30th of December in the Vendée Globe, the skipper's 50th day at sea. And the battle between the top two is as close as ever, just 6 nautical miles separating them. But Séb Simon in third could be making a comeback. And then when we look at the gap between 5th and 9th place, just 20 miles separating them. We've had 19,000 nautical miles travelled by the leaders, and still these gaps are so tight. We then get updates from Boris Herrmann out on his yacht and Jérémie Beyou, and also Thomas Ruyant gets visited by a pod of dolphins, so the South Atlantic treating these three. We take a look at the tracker and these incredibly close positions and the leaderboard and who's making the gains at the moment. And on PredictWind, we take a look at Yoann Richomme, who is in the lead currently, what his options are through to Les Sables d'Olonne, because it could be that a week is taken off the Vendée Globe record. And we also look at the storms that are coming through towards Cape Horn at the moment, which could be affecting those who are about to approach that famous landmark. And then we conclude with an extended interview from Pip Hare, who safely arrived in Melbourne, talking about the ordeal that she went through.
Oh, the sea is so green. I wonder how deep it is here. 200 meters. Look, there's Advance going 19 knots. Charal doing 9 knots. Falkland Islands, I need to bear away a little bit to leave some to port. And we do between 17 and 20 knots.
It's always a treat to take a look at some of the yachts from the outside, and we can take a look here at Jérémie Beyou's Charal 2, which is one of the most radical boats in the fleet. And here he's clearly enjoying the South Atlantic conditions, and as he says, it's 4 seasons in 4 days.
Changement d'ambiance. On a les 4 saisons. On a les 4 saisons en 4 jours, quoi. Ouais, bah ça fait du bien le soleil.
There was a treat for Thomas Ruyant on Vulnerable as he made his way up the South Atlantic in 4th place when a pod of dolphins came to take a look at his yacht. My first thoughts were, please keep clear of that foil on the port side, but they seemed to know exactly where it was, and he was just treated to an amazing sight. At the front of the fleet, we can see Yoann Richomme and Dalin are only separated by 6.1 nautical miles. These two just continuing to have this incredible battle. But while they're involved in that and in light and upwind conditions, we can't discount Séb Simon, who is currently reaching, and importantly, he is on starboard jibe, which means he is using his port foil. He has just cut down that gap between those two leaders and himself to 319 nautical miles, and the speeds, Yoann Richomme's only making 4.4 knots, Dalin 3.7 knots in those light winds, whereas Séb is making 14.6 knots. Further south, the group from 4th to 10th place are making their way south, led by Thomas Ruyant, who we saw with those dolphins. And it is the group by the Falkland Islands, between 4th and 9th in particular, who are separated by less than 20 nautical miles. Zooming in, we can see there are 2 distinct groups here. We've got, just to the north, we've got Paul Milhat on Beyou, followed by Boris Herrmann and Sam Goodchild, whereas a bit further to the south, we've got Jérémie Beyou and Nico Lundven. The interesting thing here is the lee of the Falkland Islands and whether the group who are further north are going to get a little bit affected by that, or whether they're going to be able to make it through ahead of both Jérémie Beyou and Nico Lundven. And we've got there in 10th place Justine Metro, who is also using that northern option. In 11th place, Yannick Besteven is making his way into sheltered waters to repair his steering system on board his yacht, while the group behind seem to have avoided the worst of the strong winds in this current Pacific Ocean depression, with Clarice Kramer in 12th and Benjamin Dutroux making up good distance on her, and Sam Davies still taking that option slightly to the north. And we can see that Jean Le Cam, the leading daggerboard boat, has now made it past the longitude of Point Nemo. In the 0600 ranking, we can see Yoann Richomme and Charlie Dalin separated by just 6 nautical miles. This is after having done 19,000 nautical miles. The gaps are still so small. And Séb Simon, though, look at his average speed over the last 24 hours, 21.5 knots, as opposed to Yoann Richomme's 11.3 knots. Séb is also in more favourable conditions, and so the comeback is really on, which is remarkable considering he has that broken starboard foil. Then we look down at the gaps between 5th and 9th place, just under 20 nautical miles. This group has travelled 17,000 nautical miles, and yet you have this group so tightly bunched. There is going to be a shuffle in this leaderboard over the next 24 hours as those 2 different options play out, and I can't wait to see what is going to happen here. Sailworld.com's New Zealand editor Richard Gladwell has done PredictWind routing options for Yoann Richomme in the lead, and we can see once he gets through these light winds along the South American coast, there are more favourable reaching conditions as they make their way across the equator and into the northern hemisphere. After that, it's starting to pick up on the North Atlantic storms, which make their way from west to east this time of year with some intensity. And we can see one barreling across from America, and it looks like as they pass the Azores they can use that breeze to make their way back to Les Sables d'Olonne and the finish line. And it is possible that a week could be taken off the existing Vendée Globe record. One thing we are keeping a very close eye on are the storms which are making their way through the Pacific from west to east at the moment, and it is looking bad around the Cape Horn area on Friday the 3rd and Saturday the 4th of January, and particularly on Tuesday the 7th of January in the South Atlantic, where we can see around the Falklands area it could be up to 50 knots of wind with the gusts much higher.
I don't think we're ever going to really know why my mast broke, and it was a split second. I had just been through the centre of a depression where there wasn't a lot of wind. The wind was starting to pick up again with some gusts. The boat was going well, and a gust came. The boat lifted out of the water on the foils, started going really fast, and when it landed, the mast broke and fell down, and that was it.
Wow, so what sort of damage to the boat when the mast fell
down? So the mast fell down onto where I'm sitting here, and I was sitting underneath this bubble, and the mast fell down here. And so there's some damage to the top of the coach roof here. It damaged the back of the foil and the side of the boat. But in reality, I was quite lucky. The boat didn't sustain too much damage.
And so the mast has fallen down, you're thousands of miles from anywhere. What's going through your mind at that moment? Can you put us in your shoes?
A mix of emotions. Kind of the minute that I realised it had happened, it's just this grip of just, I mean, despair really. You know, because you know everything's over, and then immediately you realise that you have to act. You have to get control of the situation, because it could get a lot worse, because there's a broken stub of carbon grinding against the side of the boat, the waves are bashing it, the wind is building. There's no time to kind of just crumple. You have to act. And so I was devastated, but kind of almost went into an autonomous state where I just went down below. I got the hacksaw, I got gloves, And I came on deck and methodically went round every single part that was holding the mast into the boat, and I just cut it and worked on that. And then already I was thinking, okay, I need to rescue myself. So I saved the outrigger, I saved the boom. I was already thinking about how I would create a jury rig, a temporary mast. And actually I worked without a break for 3 hours solidly. Without even thinking about my situation, I just worked. And within 3 hours I had a mast and I was sailing again.
So is there any danger or risk to yourself while all of this was happening and your mast has come down and hull integrity is a potential problem? Do you think you're lucky to be alive today?
I wouldn't say I'm lucky to be alive, no. Don't think my life was ever in any danger. I took action straight away to stop the situation from getting worse. So that was making sure that the stub of the mast did not make a hole in the boat. That was my biggest concern.
Right.
And then once that was done, I just needed to find a way of being able to sail myself to the shore. I think the most important thing while I was doing all that work was not to injure myself. Carbon can be a really nasty substance. You can get some quite bad cuts. It can get under your skin, but also the pressures of bits sinking, kind of, things can suddenly come under tension. You can get fingers trapped and that sort of thing. So I needed to make sure that I didn't get injured while I was working on the boat. And also you can see that the guardrails on this side have all folded down, and so it was quite important to make sure that I didn't fall over the side. But after that I was fine because the boat's safe, the boat's floating, it's got a big keel on it, there's no way it can capsize or anything like that. I had half a world's worth of food, I had half a world's worth of diesel. I've got the ability to make water, I've got the ability to generate power. I had my satellite comms still, so I could talk to the shore. So actually I was in no danger at all. It was just really inconvenient.
So we know you were in the Southern Ocean when this happens, but how far away from the nearest port were you when it occurred?
I was 800 miles from the nearest point of land.
And so you mentioned that you may not ever know what really happened, but do you blame yourself or anyone for what happened to the boat?
I've been through a whole cycle of trying to understand why it happened, and I think probably there's a small part of me that still does blame myself because there's no one else to blame.
The rigger?
I've been through it in my head so many times, and I have an incredible team that prepared this boat for me. We bought a new mast, we replaced the rigging, we replaced the components that were old. We did everything we possibly could to mitigate against a dismasting, and it still happened. And in reality, I don't think there is anybody to blame.
Is it a situation that you plan for?
You do plan for dismastings in the fact that you acknowledge the fact it could happen. And I had already gone through many times the actions that I would take if I dismasted. And we had the tools on board to be able to liberate the rig straight away. I knew where they were. So instantly the mast went down, I knew where to find the hacksaw, I knew where to find the gloves. I knew that my first action had to be to liberate the rig. And I'd already thought about how I would make a jury rig too. So I guess you've prepared for it in that way. But I don't think you can ever mentally prepare for the impact of losing your rig.
Does it happen often, losing a rig?
It happens more often than we would like. I would say between 5 and 7% of the IMOCA fleet lose their masts racing every year.
Wow. And so how do you feel right now? Now that you're sitting on your boat safely in a marina at Melbourne City Marina at Docklands in Melbourne, Victoria?
Right now, I feel really grateful. I feel incredibly humbled by all of the people that have given time and energy to help me, and the people that turned up to welcome me here. And I feel grateful for that. Underneath, there is sorrow still, you know, it's a massive loss. But I'm also quite proud. I'm proud to have rescued myself. I'm proud to have kind of stood by the philosophy that I've always had around seamanship and around the fact that if we choose to take these risks, if we choose to sail around the world on our own, we need to be responsible for ourselves, and I feel that that's what I've done, and I'm quite proud of that.
And extraordinary. And how are you dealing with all of the emotions that you must be going through? I mean, it must be doing your head in.
Having 2 weeks alone on the boat to get here has actually been a really good period of process and reflection of all of those emotions, because I did have to go through a cycle of grief, I guess. It's not over. You know, I think this will come back to haunt me many times, but the really good thing is that I found my positivity quite early on. In the day after I dismasted, I was so desperately down. But I love being at sea. I love this sport. I love the person that it makes me become, and so yeah, I still managed to find some joy out there.
So skippers have a relationship with their boats, you know, like a close friend, you know, a live being. After this, has your relationship with this boat changed?
No, not at all. This boat is still an incredible weapon. I still am super proud to be the skipper of it, and we've got unfinished business.
Did the boat let you down?
No, the boat didn't let me down.
Now, was it worth all the work and effort that you put into the racing, the preparation and planning, and months of work that your team did to get you to the start line?
Even doing half a race, it's worth the effort. It is hard work. You know, the 4-year cycle for the Vendée Globe is nothing but hard work, especially for a team like ours, where we have to raise our funds as we go. And for me, I'm not just the skipper, you know, I run the business as well. And so it is immensely hard work, but my reward is on the ocean. And I've had, you know, this isn't the only race that I've sailed in the last 4 years. I've sailed a lot of races. The Vendée Globe is the icing on the cake. The Vendée Globe is what it's all about. And I would still take half a world than no world at all.
So tell us a bit about the journey on the slow boat to Melbourne, as you called it online, you know, and the thoughts along the way, and how on earth you rigged up this jury rig to sail over 800 miles to get to Melbourne.
I guess the idea for the slow boat really came kind of on my second day. I'd had this very, very down day. So I rigged up the jury rig within 3 hours of dismasting, and actually I need to give a huge amount of credit to Sam Goodchild on that, because in the New York Vendée race in June this year, Sam dismasted and he was next to me on the racetrack, and we messaged each other a lot. And I asked Sam, I said, I've never had to build a jury rig, what have you done? And I asked Sam to send me pictures, and he sent me pictures. And so instantly I kind of had a blueprint for what I was going to do. And then I had this very down day, the day after I dismasted, where I didn't really do a lot. And then I realised after one day of kind of wallowing in it that I couldn't carry on like that. And I needed to do something every day, something positive every day to make my situation better. And I thought, well, how can I make my situation better? I can make the rig better, I can sail faster, I can organise the boat. And so I decided every single day during daylight hours I would do something to make my situation better, and then it became fun. It became fun to see how fast I could get this boat to go with a temporary rig. And I thought, well, this isn't something people see that often. And so I decided I would share it. I would share what I was doing, why I was doing it, just to give people an insight into, I guess, what it's like to self-recover from the Southern Ocean.
Thank you very much for watching today. If you did enjoy this, please do subscribe to our channel using the button down here, and take a look at sailworld.com and yachtsandyachting.com for all the latest news in sailing.